Hi, welcome to my Minecraft Let's Play. If you know me personally, I'm not a huge fan of the movie Inside Out. I really wanted to like this movie. I was really excited for it. The marketing was a little dumb. Thank you. Good job on the royal baby. It was just dumb. And the movie itself, I had high hopes for, and then I went in and, I enjoyed it. It's a pretty good movie. It could be better. So if you don't know, Inside Out is a movie about a girl named Riley and her emotions, and they are all actual characters that live in her head and they control her like a robot. Like meet Dave with Eddie Murphy or whatever. She's got these 5 emotions: fear, anger, joy, sadness, and disgust. The movie goes back and forth between showing their reactions to Riley's everyday life and then like Riley in real life. And it's interesting because they were gonna do this whole movie and it was gonna be about this girl and she was probably gonna go through puberty or something, and it's like here's a cool Disney Pixar movie about a girl and she gets to do something that's like emotional and nuanced, and we're gonna really try and like break the mold, and they didn't. So my biggest problem with the whole movie is that Riley is our main character, but we know like next to nothing about her. I mean, like, things like she doesn't like broccoli, and she's afraid of clowns. She loves her family, and she's a bit of a goofball. But you never get to see this, like, actually play out in, like, a day in the life of Riley. Like, you never get to see an organic way of Riley doing any of these personality traits. The entire, like, first scene of the movie is, like, a narration done from the point of view of Joy, who is a confusing character to begin with. And everything feels, like, super weak. Joy tells you all about this character Riley that you're supposed to know, that you're supposed to travel through the movie with, but you don't actually get like an intimate moment with Riley to really understand her as a character. And the whole like back and forth between the emotions and her, it's not the same. And I'll get into how we can fix this later, don't worry. Joy is such a joy to watch. Her expressions are so good, like the way she's animated, she's so rubbery, and like her face, she's so like, I love it all, it's so good. And because of that, it actually makes everybody else look like crap in comparison. It's like watching Ava Longoria and Andy Samberg on screen together in season 2 of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Sofia Perez's eyebrows never move. Sadness is like a cardboard cutout next to how expressive Joy is. Joy's face is all over the place, and Sadness is just like, it's really lame. Disgust is the same way. She just like keeps making the same face the whole time. It's just so unfair compared to Joy, who gets so much screen time and gets so much character development, and she's such a rounded character, and everybody else in the movie, and that includes all the human characters, are just cardboard pieces of paper, just props in like a one-man show. Joy does not carry this movie, but she's forced to. The emotions never seem to have like a consistency to them. Joy has this like really strong motivation to protect Riley, but she like kind of ping-pongs between like being a part of Riley and then being like a mother figure to her. It's very clearly written by somebody who's a parent and not somebody who knows how an 11-year-old girl functions. At the end with Joy in her like tearjerker scene in the pit, it's a good scene, and when I watched it I was really emotional through it, but after rewatching it, it kind of makes me like angry. Joy is supposed to be our surrogate character. If we can't relate directly to Riley because she's less of a character and more of an automaton, then Joy is our surrogate. And no child is going into this movie relating to Joy as a parent, and that's how Joy is written. She's like a parent. She's looking after Riley. She looks at Riley longingly while she dreams and stuff, and she wishes for a time where she can be happy and safe and content at all times. I mean, rewatch that scene where she's crying in the pit and really think about like the words that she says. This is a mother who is worrying about her child, and that's the problem. Joy is not a mom. She's an 11-year-old girl, and no 11-year-old girl watching this movie can relate to that. They cannot relate to that. They are children. And after that, after joy, that's basically it for characters. Sadness is incredibly passive. The other three emotions are so one note. There are really good scenes when it's all the emotions together, like right at the beginning of the movie, and those are actually some of my most favorite scenes, because like when you have them all together, they have like a character dynamic. You know, you get that like camaraderie of like they're kind of friends, but at the same time like these are anthropomorphic versions of emotions, so they have like really strong reactions and stuff to them, and that's really cool. And it's cool to see like how they react with each other, and then like how that mirrors Riley in real life. And those little scenes they're interesting, and I like them, and I probably wouldn't tweak them too much. I'm gonna just like get into this real quick. Nobody wants to hear about it, but it's important. Anger and fear, being the only two boy emotions, just has a lot of awkward connotations to it. It's like there's a scene at the beginning where anger, while all the emotions are talking and stuff like that, says offhandedly like, "Step on it, daddy." I guess it's supposed to be like half anger is impatient, so Riley's impatient, but it's also like Lewis Black does the voice of this, so wouldn't it be funny to hear Lewis Black say daddy in the context of like him being a little girl? Isn't that hilarious? That's how I feel a lot about anger, and by extension fear. Fear has some like pretty good scenes. I mean, the dream sequence, that's great. You've got fear and he serves a purpose, and it's not like a weird joke on gender and stuff. But anger is specifically and strictly that. It's just kind of gross the way the whole thing is treated. It feels like a joke. It feels like they don't want to take Riley's fear and anger seriously, despite the fact that this whole movie is about that. Not that it's weird that she has like guy emotions in her head, but the weird implication that that carries, that you've got a group of writers who decided that anger and fear are the only men emotions in this little girl's head. The scene with the parents is really unfunny and just like embarrassing to watch. It's not funny to joke about the woman in the relationship being unhappy in her relationship. That joke about the Brazilian air pilot or whatever, it's not funny. It's not funny. And with the dad being too preoccupied with sports in his head and stuff, and it's not funny. It's just not funny. Why is it funny to have relationships that are unhappy and to poke fun at that? It's just, that whole scene is so embarrassing and not funny. Things I would take out of the movie, that shot right at the very end where Riley talks to that guy and then it goes inside his head and it's like, "Girl, you're talking to a girl. Whoa!" It's just like weird and gross, and jokes like that just like perpetuate this idea of gender into children's head that just alienates teenagers from each other. And you don't want that. When you grow up alienated from each other, you turn into weird adults who don't know how to talk to each other or treat each other with respect, and like stop making movies that have jokes like that in them. Like stop treating boys and girls like they're weird aliens from each other, because they're not. And I think that's like part of the mentality that makes this movie so weird, is just like this strange gender bias to it that's kind of bled into every part of the movie. It's just disappointing. Okay, it's time to get into an even more unhappy topic. I don't like Bing Bong. I'm sorry. I don't like him. He's not funny. He's ugly. Somebody redesign him, please. I honestly feel like the movie didn't even try to make jokes with him. The one joke that I can think of is that, like, "I cry candy." And it's not like a joke, and it feels like such a loss. I mean, you've got Richard Kind doing the voice for Bing Bong. You'd think that he would tell a joke or two, but he really doesn't, and it's kind of a loss. In fact, most of the humor in this movie feels like really detached. There's like scenes where it's like joy and sadness are doing a thing, and then it'll like cut back to fear and disgust, and they'll do like a little side scene of physical humor, and it's like the movie has to stop dead in its tracks to make a joke, which I feel like, again, is such a missed opportunity. You've got emotions and the brain and stuff, like where are the good jokes about human mentality and stuff like that? And you don't have to dumb down the movie. Kids are smart, and even if they don't get the joke, they know what is funny. They know how to be cued for laughter. And so like set up actual jokes, even if the punchlines are dumb. Kids will love it. Okay, I'm done shitting on the movie, and now we're just gonna get into how I would write Inside Out. Don't mind me, I'm gonna use this other piece of technology to help. Okay, 1. Instead of exposition, we open with a day in the life of Riley. This can be any kind of day. She can be like 8 at the time, she can be 11. I think it would be really great if we opened with the same scene with the baby, and it's Joy, and she's like, I'm Joy, and this is Sadness. And like, that's the only narration that you get, you know? And then you just go in. Riley, she's 11 years old. She's in her old house. We go through a day in the life. She gets up for school. She brushes her teeth, and all of her emotions are going off in her head. They're talking about like what they're gonna do today. They have plans. They're gonna see friends. Maybe the day opens and Joy is like, get up everybody, we're gonna get ready for school today, you know? It's just like a regular day, and each emotion gets like a little shot for themselves, you know? Like, maybe she's running late, so anger is like, we're late! Maybe she forgot her homework, so we got Sadness going like, I forgot the homework. We introduce a few things, like her relationship with her parents. There's a scene where she comes out of the bathroom and her mom is coming down from the attic, you know, Toy Story style, and she's got like a bag of stuff that she's cleaning out, and she's like, Riley, do you want to keep any of this stuff? And she shows her like, maybe it's a picture of Bing Bong that she's drawn, or like a stuffed animal that she's like, oh, this makes me think of Bing Bong or whatever. And they go like, oh, your old imaginary friend, and Riley's like, well, I'm too old for that, and then she moves on. You can even have like a little shot of like disgust, like specifically responding to this. Maybe we have a scene where like she goes down to have breakfast and she plays a prank on her dad. Just like tiny little things that take up the first 10 minutes of the movie, that gives every single character that's going to be important a little time to shine. Just something. So then we get to school and we have a few scenes. Like Riley gets to meet up with her friends, and we have like a cute little exchange with all of them, so that you see that Riley has friends and she has like a group that she's comfortable with. She's a comfortable 11-year-old girl in her home that she's always been in. Another little tweak I want to make is that I want to make Riley really into maps or navigation or something like in that area. Maybe she's really into travel. Maybe there's a scene where she mentions to her friend like, oh, I picked up a new brochure to like another island, and her friend is like, oh, Riley, you're always talking about how you want to travel. Or like maybe she's walking around school and her friend is like, I always get lost in this part of school, and Riley's like, I can show you the way because I'm really good with directions. Then we can have that kind of mirror Joy trying to push Sadness away during the whole school day. She's like, Sadness, go over there, go do something else, I don't want to be sad. And then she's like, Sadness, go read the core memory stuff. And then you have that scene of Joy putting Sadness in the circle, you know? And I want that to happen like a lot earlier. I want to have that be like, Riley has this like little quirk where she's really into travel and navigation and stuff like that, but that's her sadness, you know? That's her when she's sad and lonely, she pours herself into these research things. And then that mirrors later in the movie when Sadness is the one who helps Joy get out of long-term memory, you know? Like, now we have a characteristic of one of the emotions that mirrors a real life thing that Riley does, and it helps move the story along and makes like context better. Another scene that I'd like to add at the beginning with her friends is that they mention something about Riley's big fear, clowns. This can happen in any sort of way ever. It can be at the beginning, maybe with her mom and she's showing her the like childhood stuff and she sees a clown and she's like, bleh. Maybe she's at school and there's a clown for a school assembly and Riley talks about how she's really scared. Maybe she sees one on the street while she's walking home during this this day in the life of Riley. And it's just something. Fear gets their own scene where they're like, that's my biggest fear and I'm really scared of clowns. And then it's like, there's a nod for something that's gonna come back later. I like this idea of having all these external things happening to Riley for them to come back later as internal problems later in the movie, when the movie becomes more about joy and sadness, because that is still what this movie is about. Okay, so then after you have this day in the life of Riley, after you have all these scenes, you build up her friendships, you build up her fears, her dreams, her relationship with her family, how happy she is at home, and then in the very next scene, you destroy all that. Destroy the status quo. Riley's now moving, she's gonna have a new school, she's gonna have a new province, a new home and all of that stuff. And then you as an audience member can finally like relate to that, you know? You saw this wonderful scene of Riley and she's so happy, she's so put together, and all of that is like ripped away from her. And even you as an audience member get to feel that. Because in the original run, it's like you see this little montage and then she moves, and you as an audience member, you're even like, yeah, sure, that's fine. That's the way this movie should go. That's the way that the movie goes. That's movie. I just go along with it 'cause movie. But it shouldn't be like that. Like, movies are an escape. Movies are a story. Movies are a story, and stories are ways for you to empathize and learn and to expand your emotional library, basically. So why not have a movie where you can relate to the character? Like I said before, I'd like to keep a lot of the scenes of joy and the other emotions. I think they're really great when they're all together, and like ideally, if I were to completely rewrite this whole movie, I would basically make it so that like all the emotions go on the journey with joy, and it's like a bit more of a struggle of joy trying to balance them all, because they're all so negative and stuff like that, but it's also like a triumph when like at the end they all do work together. But anyway, that's not this movie. In this movie, it's just joy and sadness, and the other emotions do stay at the headquarters. I just would make it better. So during my third watch of the movie, I was watching with friends and I found out, don't quote me on this, but my friend once told me that apparently Bing Bong was originally supposed to be a villain. And I'm like, yes! Bing Bong being a villain makes just so much sense, and when I watched the movie the first time, that's what I thought was gonna happen. Like, I thought they introduced his character so that he could be a villain, and then that would be it. And honestly, like, I think that's a really cool way to go. Having Bing Bong be the villain is kind of like how nostalgia, like, tricks you. I'm not gonna get into that, but, like, it would be cool. Anyway, so in my version, Bing Bong is a villain, but not quite. So, it's gonna be kind of the same. You still got the idea of the core memories, sadness and joy. They have like a tussle with the memories and stuff, and they get sent back into long-term memory. At first, they don't know what to do. Sadness doesn't realize that she can utilize these like new things that she has learned from the long-term memory to help them get out. So it's kind of the same as what happens in the movie. They just kind of hunker down and start walking. Eventually they come across Bing Bong, who offers to help them. His motivation here is that he wants to get back to headquarters and he wants to be in charge because he wants to be with Riley. You know, pretty same motivation and stuff. He wants to get his hands on the core memories so that he can hopefully alter them in some way. He has a really muddy plan. Like, he doesn't really know what he wants to do, but he knows that he's gonna do it, whatever it is. Soon, he's revealed to like be trying to double cross them. You can have that abstract thought machine thing, but like instead of it being like a silly like oh no, which I like the idea of that scene, but it doesn't do anything for the plot and it doesn't add to anything. It's just like, oh no, we went through this room and now we're late for the train. I like the train of thought, but it being like part of the finale is like really lazy. Okay, so maybe Bing Bong tries to get them into this abstract thought thing, and then it's revealed he's trying to get his hands on the core memories, and he's like, ha ha ha, I'm evil. And sadness and joy are like, oh no, he's running away with the core memories, and maybe they lose sight of him, and maybe they kind of have like a bit of a disagreement, but they decide to like keep going. And then that's when they start realizing that like things are being packed up. This is the wagon scene, and yeah, I wanted to move it up in the movie. I want it to be a little sooner because the movie itself has such a lull, like right after the first act. It's so nothing good happens until like the dream scene, and then again there's another lull, and the movie's just like not paced very well. So they start noticing, you know, like things aren't so great in like imagination land and stuff. People are being packed up and they end up bumping into Bing Bong, and he's trying to make his getaway with his wagon, but it's being packed up and it ends up being thrown over the side and he loses his wagon. This is that scene where it's like Bing Bong is losing Riley, and this is like our symbolism for it. The the wagon gets thrown over the edge. He has the core memories, but he's lost the thing that's going to get him to Riley. So Sadness and Joy approach him, and Joy is at first like, hey, you! But then she sees he's really sad and she feels really bad about it. So she tries to cheer him up and she's like, hey, you know what? Maybe we can work together and we can all get to headquarters. And that's when you have that scene where Sadness sits down and she lets Bing Bong cry, because that's an amazing scene, and please keep that in the movie. I want the whole movie to just be that scene. That scene is so good. Like, that scene is too good for that movie. After that, Bing Bong decides he's gonna give back the core memories. He's reformed now and he's gonna help them for real this time. He's gonna actually do something good. And then you have Bing Bong, villain turned reformed, which is really cool and also makes the rest of the movie even sadder. So blah 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 blah, stuff happens. We've got the dream sequence. With the dream sequence, you can bring back the clown and it would just be way better. The whole thing about the clown is that it would be way better if you knew about this fear at the beginning of the movie. Because when it happens, you're like basically halfway to more than halfway through the movie and you're like, what is this thing? Like, what do you mean Riley has a fear of clowns? The characters just turn to the camera and go like, by the way, Riley has a fear of clowns, and that's gonna become important right now. Another thing I would change is probably Sadness's passiveness, to make Sadness a little less passive and more like a character who does something for the movie. I really want that feeling of Joy saying like Sadness is important to really hold like a lot of weight to it. So it would be cool to see Sadness utilize that like navigation skill that Riley has. We kind of see it at first with like Sadness pointing Joy in the right directions and stuff like that. She mentions that because she was reading on long-term memory, now she's pretty good with knowing her way around the brain. But it would be cool if like later when Joy and Bing Bong are in the pit and they do their whole thing, you know, that scene plays out basically the same way. Yes, Bing Bong sacrifices himself even after reforming as a villain, and yeah, it's because I want my audience to suffer. Not only is it sadder to have a character not get the thing that they wanted and then like die before they get it, but to have a character who like is good and deserving and tried and everything and to still not get it. It's just like, it's so sad, but it's also like really fitting, because like you can't bring that like childhood baggage through your whole life. And it's not that like you have to leave your imaginary friends behind forever, because like you can still be a kid at heart through your whole life. But there are certain things that you leave behind when you grow up, and that's what this scene is supposed to symbolize, you know? Joy is leaving behind something of her childhood so that she can grow up and deal with the future. Anyway, so Joy gets out, but while they're in the pit, it would be really cool if Sadness is putting together like the first half of a 3-part plan. Say we have the scene where the train of thought crashes, and maybe that's actually like a really common thing that starts happening. You know, they get down into long-term memory and they notice that certain things like the abstract thought in imagination land, in train of thought, they all work, but they don't work completely. The train of thought always crashes when it reaches a station, or imagination land tends to make things that aren't just Riley's like perfect imagination things. Maybe they have a place in imagination land that's got all of the reject imagination people, imaginary friends or something, and they still have them to this day. You know, these are like Riley's intrusive thoughts and stuff, things that every human deals with. Maybe the abstract thought machine turns on by itself, and that's like a problem. And while Joy is in the pit, we've got Sadness going around trying to find her. Maybe she doesn't know that she's fallen into the pit, and maybe while this is happening, Sadness is finding new unorthodox ways to have these like systems work. Maybe she finds a way to use these intrusive thoughts from imagination land to help prevent the train of thought from crashing. Maybe they're the ones who can run the abstract thought. We have a way of Sadness trying to create a new way for things to function that isn't just what Riley has learned through her whole life. Because we want to say something about mental illness, but the thing we can say about mental illness is that you're not broken and you're not dying, and depression isn't going to be something that's going to like destroy your whole life, but you just gotta figure out different ways around the problem. And then when they get out of the pit, another change I'd like to make is just how Joy and Sadness get to headquarters. I just feel like a physical solution to a problem does not have as much weight as an emotional one. Maybe they get up there and Joy sees what Sadness has done, and the train of thought is working perfectly fine, great now, or something. One of these systems that Sadness has now implemented can now make their trip to headquarters a little easier, but Joy has to meet her halfway. There has to be a moment where Joy really says to Sadness how she misunderstood her. You have like an emotional conversation where the two of them become friends, and then they decide to work together to get to headquarters. That's the big thing. The ending of Inside Out is just so lame, because instead of Joy and Sadness actually working together and actually doing something together to get back to headquarters, Joy literally uses the power of Riley's imaginary boyfriends to fling herself towards Sadness to get into the headquarters. And that whole scene of Anger getting so mad that Disgust melts the glass so that they can climb through. I hate that scene. I hate it so much. It's just so like, oh, and then things are fixed. This is a really emotional movie. The whole movie carries some pretty emotional weight to it. And it's just like, problem solved. We did it. It would just be really cool if they had like an actual conversation and then worked together to get back to headquarters. They build themselves the slingshot, but together. They fix the train of thought, but together. The first plan that they both compromise and work together on. Anyway, that's how I would change the movie. I hope you like it. Bing bong.